Start in a few minutes. Yeah, that's good. Okay, I'm going to do my shoes up, um, and then we can begin our investigation into the human experience. Our investigation, the story of humanity. The story of humanity. That's what we're doing. It's the classroom for humanity, by humanity, about humanity, for all of humanity. That's what we're doing. And thankfully, we have a growing and intelligent team here. Welcome aboard, global classmate. Yeah. Okay, so we don't, but let's, oh yeah, so I can see over there. I can actually work from that. Okay, we're getting close, but the signage looks lovely. Everything looks really good. And so we'll talk about today. We're going to deal with those things. We'll do a little review. We're going to do some content, and we're going to, in terms of the videos, yeah, I'm going to put the links for the videos, which possibly what we can do is look at the videos together. But that means that we can really fly through this. Yeah. Okay, so come back. Yeah, you're in the wrong place. Okay, so we're almost ready to begin. And I can stay at the podium. I can always go to the books. These books are really, and I should keep them close because that can become an issue. That can become a real issue. Keep everything in front of me. Keep it all in front of me. Okay, so we're getting really close here to lifting off. I hear the engines starting on the tarmac, and it's all systems go, more or less, in the Rotary Global Classroom. And let's see, we have that. Mayrene's over on the board. She's ready with her notes. Yeah, there she is. Excellent. Well, then we are now taking off for our second class of this condensed spring-summer semester of Short History of the World in the Rotary Global Classroom at Durham College. And I am your professor and captain, and you just saw Mayrene, our coordinator, who is with us on the notes. And as you can see in front of you right now, there is nobody else here live with us. So it is clear to me, based on what I'm looking at right now, that you want the recordings and you probably like the recordings, and that's great. So then we will actually, Mayrene and I, do a class with you, but we're going to do essentially a live, very current lecture, because without people here to interact with, essentially it will be Mayrene and I who are going to interact throughout this. But the main content today, even if all of these couches were filled with students and we were ready to really explore the content together, the content is the same. And that is, today we're going to explore two important chapters: the ascent of humanity and the emergence of civilization on planet Earth. And then the next chapter, Awakenings of Power, is also there for you in the Class 2 folder on DC Connect, along with this class. And so essentially, what you are getting right now is 2 chapters, very current, as a live class, and then 1 chapter recorded, and that is is Awakenings of Power. So you have 3 chapters right now for week 2, and that is Ascent of Humanity, Civilization, and Awakenings of Power. And before I begin to bring the content up on the video wall and have Mayreen also come up and tell you more about what's happening with the Global Class Hub and Expo and everything else that we're doing. I just want everyone to be very clear that the content that you are working with right now for your first reflection is from classes 1 and classes 2 in the DC Connect folder, okay? So you have there from class 1 last week where we begin. And well, you have that as a recorded lecture in, I think, a couple of parts, and you also have the class itself. So that's essentially the routine that you will have through the whole semester. There's a class to watch, and there are recorded lectures to watch. And last week, that was Where We Begin. And now we're doing Ascent of Humanity, Civilization, and Awakenings of Power for week 2. And then you have a reflection due next Thursday, May the 23rd, just one reflection on those 2 classes. 725, 750 words. You're going to learn today from the origins of writing and how humans invented writing and why that the ability to write, language, first our ability to speak to each other orally, and then later, thousands of years later, when we began to write down what we were saying and we invented symbols to do that, this is a very important power for all of us. And you're going to understand that today in Civilization when I take you through that. But also, you're about to start writing yourselves for your first reflection. Please keep in mind as you write that you are exercising a breakthrough in power for the human being. In other words, when you begin to write your thoughts, you might now, after today, have a deeper appreciation after the lecture of what you're doing when you write. And maybe you have more respect for yourself as well when you write, so that when you deliver next Thursday that first reflection of 725, 750 words, it's going to be great. You're going to do well on it. But you need to care. You need to respect the written word. And that's something you're going to understand today a little bit more. So in a moment, I'm going to bring up the lecture, and we're going to essentially go through this period of time. We're going to go from the Great Divergence today, which is where we begin ended, which is when we humans are going to begin to diverge from our early primate ancestors. And we're going to cover all of that from 7 million years ago, Great Divergence, all the way up to the Golden Age of Athens. That's where things are going to end today. And so there are quite a few million years that we're going to cover. And by the end of this week, week 2, you will have learned all about the Golden Age of Athens and why it is so important. And that is going to end with an amazing story that you're going to hear about in the recorded lecture, Awakenings of Power, and that is the death of Socrates, which I have here written as an eyewitness account from Plato, the last days of Socrates. 7 million years ago, the Great Divergence, the death of Socrates, 399 BCE. And so we're covering that whole period essentially today, except that in the recorded lecture, you're going to get the grease part of it, okay? And that's Awakenings of Power. Great. So do you want to come up and come grab a seat here? Mayrene's going to walk you through how things are going with the Global Class Hub while I essentially get the big board all ready. So please go ahead and let them know how things are going.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. So, small updates regarding the Global Class Hub. We are planning for an event in June. So we're just working logistics for that, and hopefully, once we have it all set up, I will post it in the Discord server. Please feel free to join the Discord server to know more about that. If not, then we are planning to post announcements and events on our social media channels. For now, we have an X account and Instagram. We are hoping to migrate to LinkedIn for a more professional outreach. So once we have all of that set up, I've shared with Lon the poster for a club. So if you have once it's uploaded and you have a chance to look at it, you will have access to the social media, the Discord server. So please feel free to join and contribute if you'd like. If not, then please do attend the events. We're just hoping and planning for our initiative to kind of become what we envision it to be. So yeah.
Great. On next Tuesday, the 21st of May, is there going to be something going on here? What's the plan there?
I did originally plan to have an event, so this would be in the morning, 9 to 12. But I don't think we have enough attendees
Yeah.
or people wanting to join. I do still have the booking, but I was thinking maybe in the evening to kind of do something online on the
Okay.
Discord or like just kind of do it like more of a virtual event.
Sure.
Um, as of now, I think I still will stick to like my experience at the past expo just because we don't have a guest.
Yeah.
But if we do even want to open up the platform to have like more of a discussion on a particular topic, then maybe we could even do that.
Great.
But so far, it's more of like I'm hoping it might be more of a in like a virtual event
Virtual event.
online
Okay.
as opposed to something in the classroom, just because we won't have attendees, and then if we want to have a discussion, then it won't be fruitful, but just because there's no one here. Um, I think the next major event that we should just have would probably be the one in June.
That's the Piece by Chocolate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Movie
Can you tell? Yeah.
screening.
Tell us about that.
So the event in June that I was talking briefly about earlier was actually a film screening. The film is called Peace by Chocolate, which I had a chance to watch while I was at the expo in Dubai. It actually had its premiere at the time, so this was 2021 or 22, I believe. And I had the chance to meet Tarek Hadhad, who the movie is based on. It's his life story, and the producer of the film. His name is Shadi Dali. Um, Luckily, he lives here in Ontario, in Oakville. So I reached out to him asking if he would be interested to join, our classroom to have a small discussion after we screen the movie. And luckily, he was more than happy to,
Great.
be a part of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So he's given me dates of his availability in June, and I mean, I'd rather have it earlier than later, but I said June because we might have more of a chance to kind of market the event and have like anyone on campus wanting to attend,
Yeah.
maybe even like staff, faculty, if they want to join, that would be enough time to get the word out. And if anyone has a chance to watch the trailer, it is a very beautiful movie. It is based here in Canada, so I think local students will have something they can kind of relate to as opposed to it being something more international.
Yeah.
But we that's what we're planning for June, and hopefully it's a very successful event.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. I also wanted to also talk about a few other things that are coming as well. So maybe we should get these noted too. Okay. So please, Mayrene's going to put some notes down, and if there were students here today, then we would be asking one of them to go take notes. But thankfully, Mayreen is with us, so we're going to get these notes down. So, first, something really critical that you need to know right now, which is we will not be in the global classroom for a live class next week on the 24th of May. May the 24th and May the 31st classes 3 and 4 will be live, but they'll be live from my third floor study in High Park in Toronto. So we will all be joining if you join the class live, and Mayrene's available. She will join us live from wherever she may be to assist, and the same would be for the 31st. It's just because there are other bookings here in the Global Classroom for those 2 Fridays. So please make sure you keep this in mind in case you are planning to come live for class 3, the 24th, or class 4, the 31st. We will not be here. Okay. Class 5 on June the 7th, we have a special class planned with a guest who's going to come in, a scholar, a visiting scholar from Ukraine, Olena, who is going to give a special presentation on the culture of war and peace. And I'm very much looking forward to that. This is high quality education that you are receiving from a scholar from Ukraine, which is a part of the world right now that is engulfed in conflict and war. And she's going to be speaking about that war as well as more deeply the historical references and the essentially the story more in human history of war and peace in the human story, the culture of war and peace. That's June the 7th. Okay, so just because Mayrene's getting this down right now on the big board, that's great. May the 24th, May the 31st, no classes here in the Global Classroom, but we will have a live class. I will just be from home. Maureen will be somewhere, wherever she may be, and you all are welcome, as always, to join that live class too. And then on June the 7th for class 5, we have a special guest, and then we will be here until the end of the semester, June the 7th, June the 14th, and June the 24th. And that takes us all the way up to the end of this abbreviated semester. So make sure that you are very clear about those dates. The other thing I wanted to address in terms of just general housekeeping and what's coming is a student had asked about a course outline. And there is a course outline. You can access that, of course, on my campus. Um, and I can post it for you on DC Connect, except that it's not current because it has not taken into account this condensed spring summer semester, which is 7 weeks compared to 14 weeks. So I would caution you, if you want to refer to that course outline, to to make sure that you check with me first via email to see if there are any updates to it. Those updates have not been put into the outline. So really, the better answer for the outline question is don't refer to the outline right now. Either email me and ask what's coming, or make sure you stay up on the classes. And I will always be addressing these things at the beginning of every class. There's this housekeeping, looking ahead part. So that will help you with the outline. You would see in the outline, for example, things that might confuse you. So most importantly, we dealt with this last week. There are 3 essential assignments this semester. The first one is coming next week, May the 23rd. That's reflection number 1. That's based on classes 1 and 2. Then there is reflection number 2 coming a little bit later. That's based on classes 3 and 4. And then there is the final big reflection, which is based on the rest of the classes and everything else in the course. And that's coming as well. And that's worth 40%. Reflection 1 and reflection 2 are worth 30% each. Each is 725 to 750 words. And then the final reflection worth 40%. That's 1,400 to 1,500 words. Normally, for that final reflection, I give students the option of delivering it in whatever medium they would like to. I'm not sure I'm going to do that in this abbreviated semester. I may just have you write it as well, but I'll see. It really just depends on the level of live interaction in this class. And so I'm going to watch that and see how things go in the next 2 or 3 weeks before I decide whether you will have that option in the final assignment. In terms of anything else that's coming before we start with the major part of today's class, I just wanted to let you know that yesterday I sat in here for a divisional meeting with all of my colleagues, and two of my colleagues from the business program did a great presentation on the use of AI in the classroom. And I just wanted to address this briefly for the moment because it's going to be important in terms of your assignments. I am in a process right now of learning as an educator how to incorporate AI into the classroom. You are going to see in the story of civilization, in the story of humanity, that we humans are very good tool makers. We love our tools and we love technology. That's what technology is, tools. I celebrate that. I like to think that I'm fairly enlightened in how I look at the way humans use new tools. Because the truth is, new tools give us more power, and they're supposed to give us more freedom. So I look at AI, for example, as just another new tool that humans have developed. And right now, I am trying to figure out how to deal with this in the classroom because I know that it's a tool that you are going to be expected to know how to use in the workplace. Part of making you employable and in demand in a very complicated world of work is being able to demonstrate that you know how to use the tools today that are very sophisticated. So it would not be wise for me to avoid using artificial intelligence in the classroom. Like any new tool, it's how you use it. So that's a longer way of saying that I know that you need to be using AI and are probably using it, whether I tell you to use it or not. The, the line that you don't want to cross in the using of AI for your assignments is when AI starts to do the critical thinking for you. I'm not going to give a little lecture right now on artificial intelligence. That's not what I'm doing right now. I'm simply saying to you that I know that you are going to use AI for your assignments. And I encourage you to use it in the right way. And from my perspective, as an educator who's learning how to instruct his students on how to use a new tool wisely, it seems to me that it is a very powerful tool and helpful tool in research, in gathering information. And it can be a tool for you to use in assembling, let's say, a first draft of something. But then there's the line that you don't want to cross. And that line is something we're going to be talking about through the semester. And that is when AI does the whole assignment for you, writes all the sentences for you, puts the period in the right place, the comma in the right place, chooses the words, chooses the structure. And you are going to have to start to know. You're going to have to start developing the instinct. And I will help you to do this. When is your machine helping you to cheat? You know what I'm talking about. And you are going to have to start to deal with this in your life. It is possible for you to go through school pretty well now and cheat your way through with AI. This is where we've come in the machine age. And this is what we educators are struggling with. How are we going to guide our students to use these tools in the most ethical way possible that helps them to become smarter, not more passive, that helps them to know more, not makes them dependent on machines. I'm not going to say any more about that right now. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then please email me. I have no way of knowing. There's not a single student here that is live right now. And that's telling me something right now about the level of maybe pressure you're dealing with all your other courses, the level of importance that you're giving this class, and maybe the quality of the recordings. That they're that good and you like them and that's what you want. So I don't know completely if you understand. If I ask Mayreen right now, do you understand? Probably she's going to go yes, because we talk about these things and she's been one of my students and she's a graduate and she cares about all of these things. So of course she's going to know. I'm going to say one final thing. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to use a little four-letter word, but it's not a really bad one, but it will help you to understand. When I was learning how to be a journalist, and I started as a young television reporter when I was 16 or 17 years old at City TV in Toronto, and I became Toronto's first youth reporter, and I was reporting on all sorts of events in Toronto at City TV before I then went on and became a documentary filmmaker and started writing for magazines and newspapers and making documentaries. There were older reporters who used to say, "You know what the best thing that good writers have and good journalists have is they have a great bullshit detector." A bullshit detector. I have never forgotten that. I wasn't even sure what they meant, but I gradually began to understand more and more as I was reporting that my job as a reporter was to report on bullshit. To realize where is it and then tell the public about it. This is what journalists do. They keep us honest. You now need to develop a bullshit detector about yourself. If you submit a first reflection next week that does not pass the test of bullshit, then don't submit it because you'll fail. I wish one of you was here right now to just see your eyes and see your faces, to know that you understand. But if you're going to be ready to thrive in a complex, connected, global society that is getting more volatile, more connected, and more difficult to understand than ever, you need to develop a good sense of when you are bullshitting yourself. If you hand in work to me that you know is bullshit and it gets past me and I give you full marks, do you really want to go through your life that way? Bullshitting the professor, bullshitting your bosses, bullshitting your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, and everybody just to get by? You know what you will become? Donald Trump. Do you wanna be that in a courtroom, dealing with constant lying, making things up just so that you can get ahead? Cheating your way through life? It will catch up to you, believe me. And the worst thing is you won't be able to look at yourself in the mirror anymore because you will go, "What have I become?" Just somebody that is looking out for himself or herself. And that's my life. Wow. That's what you want to leave for the world? That you cared about yourself and you bullshitted everybody. You don't want to be that person, do you? So please learn how to know that when you submit something, when you have cheated, when you have bullshitted, that you are only bullshitting yourself. And that's all the swearing I'm going to do for the rest of the semester. And I will ask Maureen against her her desire right now to write this. Please have a good bullshit detector. Could you please write that? Is it okay, Maureen? Whenever you hand in your own reflection, please have a good bullshit detector. And I apologize, Maureen, for asking you to write bullshit, but it was a very valuable lesson when I was younger. And I will just let Maureen finish this before I ask her if there is anything that she would like to add to this, because even if this room were filled with all of you, I would still ask Maureen what she thinks. Okay, so let's give her a moment to finish. I'm going to bring up my um, beginning of the presentation, and okay, so Maureen, anything you'd like to add to what I've just said?
Well, I would just say, as someone who is a fellow student and someone who graduated from this course, just please just submit your work as is. It's not worth it to cheat and go through all of that complications. It's better to potentially submit something that you don't get a good enough mark on, as opposed to cheating.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Good. Okay. Thanks. And it's okay if I ask you to write bullshit? You don't mind? Okay. Thanks. All right. So let's begin with the story today. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to roar through um, quite a few million years of history and bring us up to the golden age of Athens, which took place around 2,500 years ago, or we often say 500 BCE, before the Common Era. That's a really important moment in human history. So we're going from 7 million years ago, essentially up until around um, 2,500 years ago today. Now, as you saw from last week, we are looking at a story of humanity on planet Earth. And the way I'm going to present this is through lectures, as I do. And if there were people here, I would be lecturing, but it would be very much a discussion. And then I would stop and I would give more of the lecture, and then we would continue with discussion. But essentially, I'm just going to give more or less a flat out lecture right now. And Maureen and I will talk at times, and she'll put some notes up too for you. In terms of the videos that I'd like to show today, there are two videos, but I don't have it quite set up to show it to you seamlessly on the big board. So I'm going to put the links for you in the DC Connect folder, as I did last week for the videos too. So there are two, and I will tell you when they are coming when I get to it. So essentially, I'm going to go through my slides, images, and important information. We have our notes going, and we're going to pick up the story essentially where we left off at where we begin. I just want you to remember that we're talking about the human story on planet Earth, a story of humanity. And humanity is not just humankind or mankind, as we used to refer to it before we understood more about human rights and women and their role in our story. Humanity is also about that bond, the human bond. Humanity is also about a particular feeling too of compassion and empathy. If you look at the definition of humanity, you will see that it's a word that is freighted with subtext. It has many meanings. So it's a loaded word, it's a freighted word. So when I talk about a story of humanity, I'm not just talking about a story of humankind, I'm also talking about a story of the human bond, of what it means to be human, and a story of human compassion and kindness and what is happening to the human being. Are we becoming better towards each other or are we not? So please keep that in mind, that humanity has many meanings. In each lecture, there is always a giant that I am referring to. People who have come before us, world historians who have paved the way for us to understand this story in the 21st century. And there are many that I will be referring to, many from my own research and my own readings, many that you can follow up on as well. One of them today, who is very important, is not the person behind me, who is an original. I will refer to him shortly, but you may know his work, this person who is very current today, and his name is Yuval Noah Harari. And I'll have Maureen write that. Yuval Noah Harari, and she's going to check the spelling and everything. Let her, that's great, while I continue with this. But his books, Sapiens, Homo Deus, for example, are very important contemporary world histories. And he is someone you may have seen on YouTube. He gives talks, he's interviewed. He's from Israel, he's in Tel Aviv, but he's a very globally minded, secular individual. And so we'll keep politics out of it right now in terms of the war in the Middle East. I want to remind you that there are many, many Israelis and Jews who don't like what's happening right now in the world and want something better. Just that there are many Muslims, many Buddhists, many Hindus who want something more than war and want peace. So I think you will find Yuval Noah Harari is very much a much bigger thinker about things. And here is somebody behind me who also is one of the more original world historians, and his name is Jacob Bronowski. Jacob Bronowski wrote a book in the 1970s called The Ascent of Man. And you're looking at him right now behind me, speaking with his publisher. What's remarkable about Jacob Bronowski and why I consider him one of the giants in our story was that he also engaged with technology in sophisticated ways. He actually made one of the first television series ever done, a British television series, where he presented his story about the evolution of the human being, the story of humanity, if you will. And he inspired many others who followed him. Carl Sagan's great series Cosmos was based on Jacob Bronowski's series. The producer of The Ascent of Man was also the producer of the original Cosmos, Carl Sagan series. If you're not familiar with Carl Sagan, you probably know him through Neil deGrasse Tyson, because Neil deGrasse Tyson and his series on Cosmos is based on Carl Sagan's series. And Carl Sagan's is based on Jacob Bronowski. And the great popularizers of science in explaining these things, these huge, complicated stories of the human being on planet Earth, they come from science, they come from scholarship, and they had been inspiring each other through time. Jacob Bronowski is the original writer, popularizer of science, host of a television series, a really important person in this story. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is the latest sort of incarnation of this on television, or Yuval Noah Harari, would be the first to say they have an enormous debt to pay to someone like Jacob Bronowski. Well, he's the giant in today's lecture. Jacob Bronowski said two things that are really important to us. Before we begin with the story now, I just want to make sure it's clear. He made his television series, The Ascent of Man, and wrote his book, The Ascent of Man, based on the series, at the time when we humans were getting our first pictures of planet Earth from the Apollo missions in the 1960s. And he was profoundly inspired by those pictures, as so many human beings were. And he said, if humans want to advance now with their understanding of their place in the universe, if they really want to go forwards with this idea that we all live now together, we know we live together, we see it now clearly, we see it with our pictures. We are all on one planet. It's clear to us now, crystal clear. No conspiracy theory here. This is real. We went to the moon. We took pictures of the planet and we showed humanity. Here we are, planet Earth. It has been said that probably more important than any mission to the moon in the 1960s was when we humans looked back at the planet and began to see it and photograph it and show it to everybody. Here we are, all on this one planet, surrounded by a biosphere, and outside of it is dark and lifeless. Jacob Bronowski said about that, we need a new mind. The coming of the new mind. The coming of the new mind. He said it's going to take humanity time to understand what this means. But he said that part of his mission as a scholar, popularizer of science, he had been a mathematician and scientist as well as a writer and philosopher. He said humans are going to have to deal with the fact that their mind now has to grow and deal with this larger idea that we are all human on a planet. And there is a bigger story to tell, a bigger way of looking at our reality that transcends all borders, that transcends all religions, that transcends all histories. It doesn't mean that those older ways are not important. But we have another identity here now that we have to deal with, and that is the human identity on planet Earth. Are we ready for that? He didn't think we were. But he said it's coming. The new mind is coming. He also said something else that you're going to see in this lecture today. You may have wondered already, what is the most powerful drive in the human being? What is moving us forwards? What is leading to our progress? What is it about the human being that is so special on planet Earth? His view was that the most powerful drive in the human being is pleasure in your own skill, pleasure in doing something well. For those of you who are not educated enough yet, not knowledgeable enough yet. You might think the most powerful drive is sex. You're wrong. According to Jacob Bronowski, who studied these things, he has a more elevated, more optimistic view of the human being. And he has looked at what human beings have built on this planet and what we desire. And his view is that we take enormous pleasure in doing something skillfully well. Think about it. Think about why you're in school, why you're learning. And I'm not talking about making money, doing well in life so you can make more money. That's just a system that we've grown up with. It's called capitalism. There are bigger things that humans want, that you want, and they transcend ourselves, and they are about the desire to do something well so that we can give that to other humans. So we can all be doing things well together. Pleasure in doing something well. What a wonderful way of thinking about the human story. Well, he's a giant because he studied. He's a giant because he gave us insight. He's a giant because he communicated well to the rest of humanity. And he's a giant because he's helping us to understand a complex world. So, with that, I'm going to move on now. After paying our respects to one of the many giants whom I will talk about this semester, the world historians and others who've paved the way, here is the story that I have extracted from my studies in understanding the human story and planet Earth. Here it is, where we begin, descent of humanity, civilization, awakenings of power, spells of our god kings, a greater world, the conquest, freedom's power, humanity, staying the 20th century, and evolution. It's all coming now in these lectures and in these discussions. So let's go back now and pick up the story with the ascent of humanity. Well, let's go back to 7 million years ago, the Great Divergence. That's where we left the story at the end of where we begin. We ended in the Great Rift Valley in Africa. And if you look at the map of the world and you start to orient your eyes towards the northeastern edge of Africa, and starting from Egypt and going all the way down the edge of Africa, there is a particular kind of landscape there that 7 million years ago was filled with verdant jungle, trees, rich soil, an area where there were these primates who were living arboreally in the trees. They were largely quadruped, which is they were on all fours. They had four limbs, they had their arms, they had their legs, and they were living up there in the trees. These are our direct ancestors. We share so many of our genes with them. And we'll call the most direct one the chimpanzee. Now, what happened was that in this evolution that was taking place, and you're going to meet today the individuals who gave us this understanding of evolution, Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, we began to diverge. It's called the Great Divergence. 7 million years ago, there was this very early primate ancestor, an ape, who began to come down from the trees. We don't know exactly why. For exploration, for some kind of other need. But just the way the octopus that I showed you, that incredible mutating octopus in Where We Begin that David Attenborough filmed, coming out of the water and mutating an octopus coming onto land and then going back into the ocean, but it came onto land. Somehow there was a primate that began to mutate, meaning it began to do something differently than the other primates. And essentially, it diverged. Gradually, that primate began to survive on land. It was surviving well in the trees, arboreally, up above, but then it comes down and it begins over hundreds of thousands of years to stand, to become a biped, from a quadruped to a biped, meaning it has its two hands now. And what does it do with its two hands? Well, you think about the power that this is going to give to this animal when it can now walk with just 2 feet and has these limbs to use for something else. Well, it began to pick up things, rocks, stones, other elements around it. And it began to shape those things into something new. For example, you're looking at right now a 3 million-year-old stone. We know it's 3 million years old because of the rate of uranium in it and how that uranium has degraded. That's how we date things that are inanimate. Animate things that are filled with life, that are life, that's carbon, because carbon is in all living things. But carbon is not in inanimate things, things that don't move, that are not alive. Uranium is. And that's how we know that this rock is 3 million years old. Look at the shape of it. Look at the tip of it. Look at the opposable thumbs. We now have gradually, we're beginning to develop these opposable thumbs, and we can get a precision grip. It's called precision grip. We get a grip around this thing, and we can start to shape this thing into something new. This is a breakthrough towards the realization of new power for ourselves. This early human is beginning to shape something in this way. It has taken something and it has begun to transform it into something else. In a very rudimentary way, you are seeing artificial intelligence play out here. Not artificial intelligence in the way that you think of it. It's the idea that humans are creating something new that gives them more power. This is what happens. This is what we do. And in this, we take different parts from different places. We create a complex thing, multi-part, that gives us more power. So, for example, this early human, 3 million years ago, 2 million years ago, that has more or less the same brain size, is beginning to take not just rock, but the antlers of some kind of creature that it has killed. And you might wonder, is this human doing this out of necessity? Or are we doing it out of something else? And for the moment, I'm going to ask Mayreen to put down 2 words for us: necessity versus curiosity. Necessity versus curiosity. Before I answer this, I'd like to ask Mayreen a question to think about. Do you think, Mayreen, that when we create new things that give us more power, that we do this because we need it? Do we do it because we want it? Do we do it because we're curious what we might get if we create something new? Why do we create these new things? What do you think?
Well, I think in the age we're talking about of the first man, I think at the time it was more out of necessity. But right now, as modern humans, I would say it's more out of curiosity.
So we could say that necessity is the mother of invention,
Yes.
which is the cliche.
Hmm.
But we could also say invention is the mother of necessity, couldn't we?
Yes.
So could you write that down? Invention is the mother of necessity too? What I've just said is not original. Jared Diamond, another giant in our story who's authored Guns, Germs, and Steel, The Third Chimpanzee, Collapse, another very popular historian and scholar who writes extremely well and has written bestsellers like Yuval Noah Harari. He is the one who has spoken at length in his book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, about the idea that actually invention is more the mother of necessity in his estimation. We can't say for certain what was driving that early human to begin to transform that rock into a weapon, but it was transformed. And essentially, as we begin to look at what began to take place in the eastern part of Africa in the Great Rift Valley, we begin to see something quite remarkable happening there because of this human that is emerging with these new powers. This image actually is of footprints, real footprints that are about 75,000 years old in Africa. And these footprints have been well preserved because of the soil in this part of the world and some ash that came from a volcano, an eruption that you can see in the distance in this image. But these footprints are 75,000 years old. And essentially, what we're beginning to see now happening is that in Africa, these humans were starting to move a lot. They were starting to move a lot further from the areas in which they had been living because they had their 2 feet, not just their four. That gave them a lot greater ability to withstand longer distances without getting tired. That's what we humans are very good at, actually. It's called endurance. There are many creatures on this planet who can go faster than us, but how many can go longer than us? We are the ones who have this amazing endurance from our 2 feet and from the hair that we have lost over time as well, that allows us to get rid of our heat when we're hot. We sweat it out instead of holding onto it inside all of our hair. So we're able to go for longer distances. And as a result, we started to hunt down more animals further away from us. And we started to walk further and kill more. And that's how we started to come out of Africa. This may be hard for you to deal with, but in the modern scientific story of evolution that we're confirming more and more with every new scientific revelation from genetic science, from the study of human anatomy, from what the earth is giving up to us in terms of what we're seeing from archaeology and anthropology and utensils and items and footprints and all sorts of other things that are coming up. We all are African if you actually go back far enough and begin to understand the planet-wide story. How is that for a little bit of truth for you? For you, the white person, for you, the Chinese person, for you, the Indonesian, for me, the Russian Romanian, Welsh, Canadian Jew. For Maureen, the Indian, Emirati, Canadian is Muslim. For the Russian, Ukrainian, for all of you, we all started in Africa as humans. And gradually we begin to spread out over these thousands of years. Now, from 75,000, 65,000, 55,000 years, we start to spread to different parts of the world. And some of us stay in these parts and they begin to adapt to those different environments. And yes, their pigment changes, their color changes. Some of you are not going to like this. And I can only say to you, I will bring to you the science-based story of evolution, and I will let you think about this in terms of what your religion has told you. Gradually, as we began to spread across the early human societies that began to be created, we go from the Great Rift Valley in the northeastern part of Africa, and we begin to go eastwards around the Persian Gulf towards what will become early societies in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, China, Russia. Others will have gone westwards. They will go into what will eventually become Europe. Gradually, we humans are going to figure out how we get across the Bering Strait, which is way up at the northern part of eastern Russia that connects the Alaska and Russia. Today, it's water. 20,000 years ago, it was land. And we walked across that. And gradually, we will walk into what are the Americas, and we will populate this. This is all going to happen over thousands of years, not millions, thousands. We humans accelerate the process of evolution. Everything that we do, everything that we touch, everywhere we go as humans, we speed everything up because we invent, we create. We're always pushing the boundaries. That's what it means to be a human being. And so, what did we start to do in terms of putting these cave paintings up? We found these remarkable cave paintings in southern France, Lascaux, France, for example. But we can see these in other parts of the world too, in Indonesia too, further east. This painting, this cave painting that you're looking at right now is about 17,000 years old. It was put there in a cave deep in Lascaux. And you may ask yourself, how did this picture, lifelike, drawn to the dimensions of this large creature, kind of like a bison, kind of like a bull? There were many of these large creatures on Earth that we humans were contending with as we were spreading around, and we're going to do something to all of these animals. And I'd like Maureen to write this. It's called the megafaunal extinction. Mega, well, you know what mega means. Huge, large. Fauna means animals. We divide the kingdoms of life, as I mentioned in the first lecture I gave and where we begin, into flora and fauna. And I will have to correct myself now because I believe I made a mistake in there. Sometimes I do this. I'm speaking a little too much. And I told you that first, flora are plants and fauna are animals, and that's correct. And then I turned that around, and I don't know why, and I said the opposite. And I said, no, fauna are plants and flora are animals, and that's wrong. The correct thing is, of course, that fauna are animals, flora are plants. These are two great kingdoms of life, and there was a thing called the megafaunal extinction. We killed off all the big animals. Do you know that once upon a time, not that long ago in North America, about 15,000 years ago, you could have come across saber-toothed tigers, these huge sloths, horses, large horses, and many other very large creatures. Saber-toothed tigers. We killed them. And you know how we killed them? Well, we started to engage in what's called strategic planning. Let's make sure we get this in the notes. You may think that we humans started to put pictures of animals on the walls of caves just because we had an artistic impulse. We wanted to draw things and pass that on to the next generation of human who might see this. Of course, for a human from another generation that followed the one that put this there on the cave, they would have to first know how to get into that cave. And then they would have to light that cave up with some fire because there was no electricity yet. They would have to know how to go to that place. And we weren't doing any writing yet. We were passing knowledge to each other just orally. So it would have been more difficult for humans to know in succeeding generations about this particular painting or image in a cave that was there. No, it was not made for art. E.H. Gombrich, another great world historian you're going to hear about, he wrote a book called The Story of Art, A Little History of the World. He's looked closely at this idea of why we humans were starting to put things and create things and paint things. His book, The Story of Art, is a standard text in art schools around the world. He's a very good historian. E.H. Gombrich, Gombrich, another giant. He said that he believes the reason we really were starting to put things there was for the same reason that we will eventually begin to start writing: control. It's just like a coach who's drawing out the moves on a chalkboard that the team is going to undertake in the game. It's like a hockey coach standing in the dressing room and saying on the chalkboard, draws the rink. You know, here's the center line, here's the blue line, here's the goalie, and the team's watching, and he's saying, well, Sydney, today you're going to go over here. And, well, Austin, if you can get off your butt and start being a real star that we know you are and start actually delivering in the playoffs, which is what Austin Matthews can't seem to do, but sorry about that, Austin. It's the coach drawing out the game and planning what the team is going to do when they step onto the ice. Well, that's what we were doing. We were drawing the animal before we went out and killed it. You see, to be able to take down a very large creature, megafauna, you need several people to do that. And you need a plan. You need to have a little session in the cave. And it would be, Lon is going to be here looking at this painting. Mayreen's going to be here. We're going to have Mediha. We're going to have Farha and Mujib, her family, and then we're going to have everybody else. And we're going to say, yeah, we've got to get that big woolly mammoth tomorrow. Mayreen, you think you can handle the front? I'll go behind, and Mujib, you're going to jump on top, and you're going to make sure that those big bison horns and tusks don't come down. And gradually, the 7 or 8 of us, we're going to kill it, and we're going to have that meat, that protein. And we've already figured out fire. We're already making fires. We began to discover how to create our own fire hundreds of thousands of years before, and we're going to cook that meat. And we're not going to get sick from eating it because we will have actually cooked it. we were putting these images up so that we could strategize before the hunt. This is what E.H. Gombrich tells us, that our desire for control over nature, our desire to dominate nature for our own purposes, is a very powerful force. And with our larger brains that had developed over these millions of years when we were bipeds on the ground instead of quadrupeds, we were facing much more complex challenges. So our brain had grown over time. We were becoming smarter. We were becoming able to communicate to each other what we need to do. We weren't writing yet, we were talking. But gradually, we began through this strategic thinking and planning together by writing things out on a wall or creating an image of it, we could then get control of it. That's why E.H. Gombrich has said that the picture is the blood relation of the written word. Writing is still thousands of years away. We were only talking now. But we were drawing things. We were putting them in front of us on the wall of a cave. Not because we wanted to be artists or because we love to draw. Maybe in a little sort of way we were doing that, but ultimately it's his estimation as a scholar and historian who was studying this that we were doing this so that we could succeed in the hunt. I want to actually go a little faster now and get to the conclusion of Ascent of Humanity, and then go as far as I can into civilization, because I want to introduce you to some very important human beings in this story. They're going to be the first real humans, apart from the giants whom you've met, who are central in this story and have given us so much. I'm talking about two specific individuals. One is Charles Darwin, the other one is Alfred Russel Wallace, and they're the two great humans who showed us that there is a thing called evolution happening on planet Earth. And I'm about to tell you how they figured that out. But first, I want to stop for a moment. Let Mayreen finish writing this, Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. And could you come up for a moment, and we're going to just have a quick little chat before I begin telling you this. We're about to explore a very difficult part of the story, sometimes for all of us to understand. Through this whole story so far, from 13.7 billion years ago, you saw the Big Bang and the creation of the planet or the sun, the solar system, the creation of life, the prokaryotes, the eukaryotes, the origins of complex life on this planet. You've seen about the dinosaurs a little bit and other creatures, and how we humans, 7 million years ago, began to diverge from other primates. And essentially, I've taken you up to a period right now of about 30,000 years ago. That's where we just stopped with the cave painting in Lascaux, France, 30 to 25,000 years ago. That we humans are spreading out to other parts of the planet. We're changing as we go. Our brain has grown. We're bipeds. We're killing more animals, and we're becoming more dominant. But I want to stop for a second because I want to remind us of the most important force in this story that we are exploring of the human race on planet Earth, and that is the force of evolution. The science-based story of evolution is the one that I've been explaining to you so far. And that all is because there were two individuals in the 19th century, the 1800s, who began to see something through their own observations as scientists. And they were the ones who began to introduce us to this idea of evolution. And eventually it becomes the foundation of modern biology. The science of biology is based on the theory of evolution through natural selection, Charles Darwin's theory, that is more than just theory. But I want to just stop for a moment and just first remind all of you that when we talk about evolution, we're talking about what two young men, in a moment you will meet, began to see when they studied animals, other animals on this planet and other things. But I want to come back to this idea of science and religion and our origins, because evolution is something that our religions have been telling us all about too. And this is where I want to bring Mayreen a little bit in. In no way would I ever want to make you uncomfortable when I'm asking you these questions. I will make myself uncomfortable before I make you uncomfortable. But I want to talk a little bit about religion, okay? In Islam, one of the great world religions, what does it say about evolution in terms of how we began to come to this planet? Does it veer a bit from what I've been saying so far, or does it make room for this idea that we began to evolve from other creatures and begin to dominate? Can you help us understand a little bit?
Well, the information that I have, and I don't have way too much information, but Islam definitely agrees a lot with science. There's also like mention of how there's a theory that iron was actually in space and then it came to Earth when it
Yes.
formed. So that's also mentioned in the Quran. So a lot of it we agree with. Obviously, there's no mention of Adam being the first human ever or first living creature on Earth. There is that he was part of, you know, there were species before that. There was life on Earth before that. So
He wasn't the first.
no, he
He
wasn't the
wasn't the
first
first.
form of life on Earth. So there's a lot of agreement with that. And for me personally, as someone who believes in both science and religion, um, I tend to take whatever both like the common factor between both of them, as opposed to, oh no, science says this, the religion says this, I only agree with one side. It's you have to see where it meets in the middle for sure.
Thank you for saying that you can believe in both. I do too. And I think that both can coexist. I want to remind you that as we begin to look at great empires and civilizations in history, whether it's early Mesopotamian culture, Egyptian culture, or Chinese, or Indian, or Islamic, or Jewish, um, you're actually going to start to see that many of the great scientists were also very religious too. Isaac Newton was religious, and Charles Darwin was to an extent. But the my point is that you will see through some of the stories of civilizations and societies that it's the religious societies that actually appreciated science. And there's no greater example for this than the great House of Wisdom in Baghdad, what is now Iraq. You're going to learn that the Islamic Empire that grew out of the teachings of Muhammad actually brought to the world a deep appreciation of mathematics and science and astronomy, and that other religions too, Christians and Jews and Buddhists and Hindu, recognize that these forces can coexist. In fact, they can feed each other very well. And so I just wanted to remind you of that as we go forwards now with what Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace saw, that this does not mean that religion becomes less important. It just means that they were seeing something, a force on the planet that we needed to understand, and that it is possible that maybe the objective that our gods or God have for us is more complicated, more creative than we fully understand yet. And we're learning how to be witnesses to God's creation on this planet. And that maybe what we've been saying so far about what God or the gods want needs to be revised. Doesn't mean that they don't exist, those forces. It just means that maybe we haven't witnessed everything yet. But we are the witnesses. We are seeing in the natural world what no other creatures on this planet have ever seen. And we're communicating that to each other and understanding that. So let's see what Charles Darwin, Alfred Russel Wallace began to tell us. Okay? The important detail here is that Charles Darwin, who has provided us with the first comprehensive account of how evolution and the process of change has been happening on the planet, was a young person like yourself in his early 20s in the 1820s and 1830s in London, in England, who was not comfortable being in school. His father wanted him to join the clergy and to follow a much more traditional, preordained life, but he was too curious. He had been very fascinated as a young man in England by the beetles and spiders and things that he was seeing around him. And he started to ask some very profound questions, like, why are there so many different things on this planet? All these different creatures and different things. Were they just put here like this, or is there something else going on? But what accounts for the diversity of life, the diversity of the trees, the flowers, the spiders, the beetles, the frogs? So he hitched himself a ride on a ship called the Beagle, and he went on a big adventure. This ship was going across the ocean and around the world to do some navigation for the British government at the time. And so he was able to get chosen as a young navigator and chronicler of life forms that would be seen by these sailors and others who were on board. And for 5 years, he traveled around the world on the famous voyage of the Beagle. Charles Darwin, as this young, curious person who wanted to get out of school and see the world and understand it. And eventually, he landed in the Galapagos Islands, the famous Galapagos Islands. They are a series of islands a few hundred kilometers off the coast of South America. If you look at the map, and you will see that there is Ecuador in the northwestern part of South America. And then you just go a few hundred kilometers from there, and then these islands called the Galapagos Islands, very famous because of what Charles Darwin did there and saw there. When the ship landed, and the Beagle landed, he already knew that the Galapagos were a part of the world that had this incredible diversity of creatures underwater, above, and he wanted to understand what were these creatures, what were they doing there, and he wanted to study them in even greater detail. And so he took his notebook and he spent weeks there writing down all that he saw, and he took specimens of all of these creatures back with him to England. And eventually, he spent about 5 years in his study in England with thousands of these specimens that he collected from the Galapagos and his notes. And he began to see a kind of pattern. He began to see that actually there is something called the tree of life. And that is that there are creatures that died, and then the creatures that came after them seem to have changed slightly. And then the same creatures sometimes would be on a different part of the Galapagos Islands, and they would have evolved slightly differently as well. All of these creatures, dead and alive, seem to have been adapting to their different environments, the different islands of the Galapagos, and they all seem to be connected somehow to creatures that had been living there before. And those creatures have been connected to other creatures, and they've been passing on information to one another. He didn't know how it worked. And that information, we will learn eventually, were their genes. Genetic science will confirm this. And Charles Darwin began to understand that there is this process where all living creatures on this planet have been evolving from other creatures. And over time, long periods of time, just the way life on this planet had evolved in very slow ways early on, it had continued to, but it had been accelerating in its changes. It had been gradually adapting to different environments. And he began to put forth this new idea of the theory of evolution through natural selection, which is that the creatures that survive on this planet are the ones that can adapt to their environments. And the creatures that don't, they eventually die off. It's like this huge tree. Branches grow from other branches. Sometimes the branches die and they fall to the ground, and new branches grow and grow more branches. And they are connected gradually over time to other branches and then to a trunk, which is their earliest ancestors, their shared descendants. It's called shared descent. And gradually we began to understand this idea. As James Lovelock has told us in his book, The Vanishing Face of Gaia, another giant in the history of life on Earth, intelligence is no gift from God or the gods. It is evolved by Darwin's rules of selection as the ultimate weapon that lets us rule the world and secure a safe place to raise our children. It is the intelligent creature. It is the talking creature. It is the planning creature. It is the creature that can study and connect, that understands the most. It is the creature that has the most active brain, the most neurons. That is the creature that has the most powerful weapon. It is called intelligence. Creative intelligence and critical thinking are not things that the God gave us. Those things evolved from other creatures that died and came to life, and gradually over time, long, slow period of time, the brain evolved to what it is now. And we began to rise and become the most dominant form of life. Not because this was given to us, but because we are part of this longer process of evolution. There is a wonderful video that I'm going to share with you. I'd like to show it right now, but there's no one here to show it to, and it's better you watch this online. You can see the best quality. It's about Alfred Russel Wallace. And I just want to spend just a couple of minutes setting that up for you, and then I'm going to conclude this lecture, and I will post the civilization as a recorded lecture for you. At least I'll get you to the beginnings of civilization. These two individuals, Alfred Russel Wallace and Charles Darwin, represent something enormously powerful about the human being, and that is our evolved brain. They used their powerful intelligence to explain to us what's happening in nature. That's called science. Science explains the natural world and then proves it to us with evidence. That's not religion. Science is looking at the real world as it is and trying to understand what's really going on here and then telling us, this is how it works. This is the process. Here's my proof. That's science. That is an incredibly powerful process, the scientific method. It's a powerful mind. And Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace are the ones who really, by using that power, helped us to understand the idea of evolution. We could not have created civilization without all of what we had been through that led us to this point where we had the brain power, where we had our 2 feet, where we had our opposable thumbs, where we had strategic planning. All that's about to come in civilization and the building of empires, it has come because we evolved. And it has come because of our brain power and our intelligence. In the video that you're going to see, it's all about Alfred Russel Wallace. I want to end this lecture on the ascent of humanity by reminding you that the most important part of the scientific method is proof. You probably have never heard of Alfred Russel Wallace, and that's because you haven't been taught this story well enough. Charles Darwin was not the only person who began to see this process of evolution. There was another person, and he was at another side of the world a little bit later in the Malay archipelago. That is the Malay Island around Indonesia, the islands. There were the Galapagos off Ecuador. There were the Malay Islands around Indonesia. And Alfred Russel Wallace also saw and recorded the same process that Charles Darwin did. As a matter of fact, in the 1850s, when Charles Darwin first released The Origin of Species, he spoke about Alfred Russel Wallace and how important Alfred Russel Wallace was. These two men, independently of one another, saw the same thing. This is when we know we're in the land of fact. When people independent of one another in different parts of the world see the same thing, then we begin to sense we are in the world of fact, not make-believe. The video you will see of Alfred Russel Wallace is lovely. It's kind of animated, but it's an attempt by a very creative filmmaker to understand Alfred Russel Wallace and what he went through. It's one of the best videos that you're going to see this semester because it creatively and convincingly provides you with insight into the mind of a young scientist. I want to conclude by reminding you that we're about to start looking very closely at civilization and the first societies and the first empires, and that's coming in the next talk. Today in the 21st century, we have a very developed, connected global civilization. But we also have a very big problem. We are living in a world increasingly of bad information. You've probably heard of disinformation, misinformation, weaponized information, the fungibility of truth, that there is no fact anymore. It's just what you can get attention for. That's all that matters. Well, there's some truth to that. Social media, to some extent, is responsible for amplifying this. But my point is, there is a thing called a fact. You may not think there is. If you are drenched in the world of TikTok and Instagram and social media, where it's all just about attention, and people saying, I've got my facts, and your facts are wrong. Actually, there's a thing called a common fact. We know many things. This is an arm. The world is a sphere. We have a sun. We could go on. It is only from our best scientists working with the scientific method where they observe what's happening in the natural world. And they test it out. And they gather evidence. And they begin to prove and connect that this is true. When we have that, we have fact. Now, a good scientist, a really honest scientist, will tell you, this is a fact that I have discovered until I'm proven otherwise, until somebody comes along in the future and maybe will prove with new information that we never had, but now we have it, that actually, Mr. Darwin or Mr. Wallace, you weren't quite right. We have some new information. A good scientist will embrace that and go, thank you, I have the new information. I never had that information before. But the best science, Charles Darwin, Alfred Russel Wallace, and many others you will meet, were working with the best information they had, observing in the best way that they could, and they gave us what they thought. That is a fact. Facts can change when new information comes along, but we all have to be willing to accept that there is a thing called a fact. And sometimes it may change later, much later, if there is new information, but we must accept it, just the way a jury will accept something beyond a reasonable doubt. You may still have a doubt. You may think something may come along so it makes this all untrue. No. You will always doubt everything. At a certain point, you have to accept that we agree on this information, because if we don't have civilization. We have war. We have conflict. We have people shouting at each other, screaming and fighting over their versions of what is a fact. If we want civilization, we must agree. There must be something common, and you will see that in our story. I'm going to leave you with that thought. Science is essential to civilization. Hopefully, I'll see one of you live and we can talk with you, but probably you're all so busy. So have a great week, and I look forward to your first reflections. And I will post Civilization with Awakenings of Power as your recorded lectures. And I'll see you here next week for, after Awakenings of Power, Spells of Our God Kings and A Greater World and the Conquest. Mayreen, do you want to come back and just we'll check in with her and make sure we have everything covered? Is there anything you'd like to address about this idea of what we've discussed or anything around the hub, the Global Class Hub, or anything coming up, feel free. Otherwise, we're going to conclude.
Well, I think it was a really interesting class, and it talks about a lot of lessons we have to learn from history. In terms of history, when Lon mentioned the House of Wisdom, while I was at the last expo in Dubai, we had the pavilion called the Mobility Pavilion. It's called Aleph, which is the first alphabet of the Arabic letters, and there's a little bit about the House of History, and the history of that, and how it kind of talks about how it plays into the story of humanity. So when I do the little class that I have about either the World Expo or maybe even just the Elf Pavilion in general,
Yep.
to be more specific, then I will definitely talk about it. I have lots of videos and pictures of that little piece from the pavilion. Yes.
Yeah. Next week, when I start to show you about a greater world after Spells of Argyle Kings, I will be talking about Cordoba in southern Spain, a place I lived for about a year many years ago. And Cordoba, once upon a time, was the center of the Islamic Empire and a kind of golden age of learning. But it was very intercultural, interfaith. Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together in Cordoba at that time, and it was very advanced as well in its scientific discoveries. And even the Caliph at the time, the Islamic ruler there, one of his important advisors was a Jew, Maimonides, great Jewish philosopher. So you're going to see that there's a real way for religions and these worldviews to coexist around the power of science and understanding. That's wisdom. Okay, everybody. See you soon. We're signing off here, and I'm going to end the. Where are we? The live. Oh, here it is. Oh, what happened to my? But anyways, I'll do it here. Okay, hold on a second. Um, where's my cursor? I think it's gone. There we go. And we want to end the live stream. Okay.